Asym games. Yeah, that's the intro. In all seriousness, Asym games are something I talk about a lot in this channel. I mean, it's what my channel has been built on, and after being added to a few games as a tester, and maybe working on my own as we speak, I gotta say, they're the one game people think of when you think of the word unbalanced. But a lot of the arguments I see for them being unbalanced is often someone just saying, oh, this killer's kind of bad at killing people. There aren't that many people who really delve into the whole game and genre as a whole, because there are a lot of different things that go into balancing. I don't think I have to tell you that. It's not just survivor and killer kits. It's not a black and white issue. You know, because the amount of survivors, the amount of time, the map layouts, even base mechanics of the game all have a huge effect on a game's balance. If you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. Subscribe and join my community Discord. And let's not waste any more time. Now to the video. In order to talk about balance, let's talk killers. Killers in Asym games are my favorite thing to play in them. There's nothing more fun than murdering someone after all. But killer is also a thing that a lot of the games simply just don't get right. After all, you want your killer to feel strong without also making them frustrating to fight against for survivor gameplay. After all, survivor gameplay is just as important as killer gameplay. So this becomes a very interesting dilemma right off the bat, because you want your survivors to be weaker than the killer, but you don't also want to absolutely destroy the whole team like fodder. I think that killers in Asym games often have two main qualities about them that can determine how strong they are. Map pressure and chase lethality, or more simply, how much of the map can you keep under your foot at any given time, and how fast can you kill or down someone in chase. Let's take Outcome Memories for an example. Colossus is a character that is incredibly deadly in chase against one person, but he can't really control the map at all. His threat level is very much so just a radius around him. This is different from, say, Ennard in Bite by Night, who is pretty bad in chase, but makes up for it by having good map pressure and control through his little minions. And also just being able to like appear out of nowhere through stealthing. That's also a little factor. Of course, map pressure is a little more subjective than chase lethality. You can argue that a killer with good mobility also has control over the map, such as 2011X from OM. Actually, I think he's a good example of a killer who isn't that lethal in chase, but is good at having constant pressure over the map at all times. After all, with invisibility and God's trickery, you can never really lose the survivors. Most Asym games tend to have killers that have too little or too much of both quantities. Ideally, you want a killer to have a healthy mix of both. If they always know where you are, or really severely limits your options while also being good in chase, then it becomes frustrating, unfun, and unfair. But on the other hand, if you have a killer that isn't good at chase and can't really control the map too well, then you get the opposite problem where the game just becomes too easy and survivor-sided, which is what we're trying to avoid. So in this hypothetical game that we're making right now, you would want a killer to be good at one or the other, or be a more all-rounder with both. But not too much of both, or else you just make the killer too strong. A good example of a decent all-rounder is the Mimic in Bite by Night. While I do think he does have problems, he's also a pretty good show of both. Each of his modes does different things. You have good map pressure with stealth, you have good chase with speed, and you have strength, which is fairly situational, but it does work. When you're making a killer, you should always have its counterplay in mind. You can't haphazardly throw things together and expect it to work. A good example, and I hate to bring this up, is Dead by Daylight. For the most part, does this pretty alright. Every killer more or less has its own unique counterplay to it. Trapper, you have to be a little mosquito and disarm his traps while he's setting up. Krasu is body blocking, Michael Myers breaking line of sight. Having to have a specific team to break through a killer isn't good game design. Cough, Outcome Memories Fleetway. And I get it, you know, Fleetway is fun, and I do think he is kind of an outlier, but generally forcing a team to have a hyper-specific group, be it characters or perks, is not a good idea, because that makes the game lean into the whole unfun territory, because it limits your options and match variety by forcing the people to play against this in a very specific way. Before I can discuss this further, we need to talk survivors as well. Survivors are often the thing that makes a game frustrating. Any Asym game that you can think of probably has numerous videos explaining why it's very survivor-sided. If you need an example, Sonic.exe The Disaster Eclipsed. That's all I'm gonna say on the matter. Now, this is where the whole concept of balancing can be thrown out the window, because this is also where objectives come into play as well, but we'll get into that. Generally, unless it's a last man standing situation, you want survivors to not be very self-sufficient on their own, unless maybe, just maybe, they're a sentinel slash survivalist type of thing. There are generally 3 types of classes you have to have in Asym games. You have your supports, sentinels, and survivalists. Here's where the balancing can come apart very quickly, especially if you have a good team you're going against. How many times have you, as killer, gone against a good team where there really wasn't much you could do? Be it an Outcome Memories team that was on point with their stuns to keep Cream alive that resets the whole team, or a pesky security guard, fighter, and medic combo on Bite by Night, it's a real problem. And a lot of people's first instincts is to just say, hey, you should just nerf the survivors. But that doesn't really fix the issue. That leads to a completely different problem where then the survivors can't survive. There have been attempts to make a more balanced survivor cast in the past, but it never usually goes well, because if you have a team that is an impenetrable wall, then, well, you can't break through it. It's impenetrable. That's literally the definition of impenetrable. I think the main issue that these games often have is that every survivor often covers everyone's mistakes too easily, which is generally fine sometimes, but it's also not an easy thing to fix. For example, in Outcome Memories, if a Knuckles misses his counter, there are like 5 other survivors that can save him. So what I propose in this hypothetical Asym game that we're making is make survivor kits more funky. What I mean by that is don't be afraid to do different things. Survivor teams shouldn't always have perfect synergy. This would not only make good plays for survivors more skillful and rewarding because the killer wasn't expecting it, but it would also make the game much less frustrating for killer players because there would be weaknesses that they could exploit the team to win. I hate to say anything positive about the game, but TDE is kind of cool with some of its movesets. Vector is a really neat character. He doesn't work well with a lot of the cast without also having a cream, but he is also pretty useful even if he is fodder at times because people just don't know how to play him. His kit is kind of out there. You have both backliner and frontliner moves that make him not really mesh with the rest of the cast. He's flawed in a good way, and it's really neat how they did it too. And that's what I'm saying. You shouldn't have survivor things that mesh completely well with the rest of the survivors, or else we have the exact same problem of having the impenetrable wall. And that's what we're trying to avoid here. Objectives. Let's talk them for a second. They are the bane of a lot of players' existences. Because obviously, if you're doing an objective, you should be rewarded for doing them. But you also can't have too much of a reward, especially against a bigger team of survivors, to stop objectives from flying by and giving you no time to do anything about it. Bite by Night is pretty notorious for this. You take a single chase and half the things are done by the time you get 1 kill, which is pathetic. Objectives should have more of a risk-reward factor. The battery objective on Bite by Night is a pretty good example actually. It slows you down and makes you a huge target, but furthers the night quite a bit, even though that doesn't make much sense because how does putting a battery in the thing make your clock go faster if it's... don't think about it too much. Much more balanced than generators, in my opinion. The thing about generators in a lot of games is that they really only take about 30 seconds to do, and they have a huge impact on the game. Again, take 1 chase and you have these pop like so fast. So ideally, you'd want a game to not have that heavily skewed reward for a risk that really wasn't that much of a risk, right? Easier objectives should have less of an impact on a match, and not always do they have to be generators or something similar. Be creative with them, right? Make some of them like open up more of the map, have an effect on the killer, etc. I think a lot of these games either make it to where the end goal of the survivor gameplay is to sit on generators or have the generators tick down the time faster. Calling back to a previous video, what if you had an objective that you had to be done periodically to prevent the killer from being buffed? That would be cool. Very cool, actually. But as it stands, most objectives are just pretty easy to do unless it's in a dead end. Yeah. Speaking of dead ends, maps. This is where balancing of these games oftentimes fail, or every game more or less has a problem with its maps. Dead by Daylight has the game, Outcome Memories has You Can't Run in Green Hill, Forsaken has Bloodfell Manor, Bite by Night has Forest, you get the point. Maps are often a weak point in these games, but really, they don't have to be. Maps are not that easy to make, I'm just going to preface this, but if you do want your maps to more or less be a one-size-fits-all everything, not saying they all have to be the same, or even perfectly accommodate everyone in the cast, but generally you'd want your maps to be at least viable with everyone in the game, be it survivor or killer. For example, if a map has long sight lines, then every killer should be able to deal with them, be it teleports or blitzing, stealth, or projectiles. Every killer should have at least one way to deal with every situation that a map throws at it, or else the map is flawed. Also, looping. Dear God, looping is generally like one of the most hated aspects of Asym games, and for good reason. It's unfun, unintuitive, boring, etc. So instead of looping, you should probably make your game focus more on teamwork. Here's where the balancing can come apart very quickly, especially if you have a good team you're going against. How many times have you, as killer, gone against a good team where there really wasn't much you could do? Be it an Outcome Memories team that was on point with their stuns to keep Cream alive that resets the whole team, or a pesky security guard, fighter, and medic combo on Fight by Night. Because if you have a team that is an impenetrable wall, then, well, you can't break through it. It's impenetrable. That's literally the definition of impenetrable. I think the main issue that these games often have is that every survivor often covers everyone's mistakes too easily, which is generally fine sometimes, but it's also not an easy thing to fix. Oh shit. Oh, right. Oh no. See, that's what I was talking about earlier about the balancing dilemma. You cannot perfectly balance an Asym game. Something is always going to get in the way. Be it maps too good for looping or too constricting. Survivors so good that they're untouchable, or killers so good that they're unstoppable, or even objectives so hard for either side that just makes it outright fun to go against. There's not a whole lot, and even just base mechanics like looping can end up being really unfun and frustrating to go against. Asym games right now, as a whole, in my opinion, are flawed. Every single one of them. So, is that it? Are Asym games forever doomed to be the bottom of the barrel? Terrible games for terrible people that are doomed to be unbalanced forever. In their current state, yes. There really isn't that much that you can do. There will always be something that gets in the way. Always. That is just how Asym games are designed. There will always be something that gets in the way, stopping them from being a perfectly balanced game. But I think that can change. Maybe. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. I don't. I'm literally not psychic. But there are a few things that maybe you can do. Instead of trying to balance everything and make the community happy as a whole, right? Instead of catering to the community, that the game should always be slightly sided towards the killer. And I think behavior has the best philosophy. Behavior has the best philosophy when it comes to killers, even if they don't really show it that much. Killers should have generally about a 60% win rate when it comes to them. Teamwork should be emphasized and required, not a suggestion. Very much so. A team should be at its strongest when everyone is alive, and it becomes harder when people are picked off, and the main priority of a game is to have fun, so maybe also focus on that more as well. Have things that can exploit as killer, but also make it somewhat of a challenge to break through a good team if you're doing that. From a survivor side, every killer should have a clear and concise counterplay for the killer that'll make it harder to break through your team and give you a fighting chance. Keep maps semi-neutral and give objectives a proper reward for the amount of risk that goes into it. Again, Asym games as a whole right now are heavily flawed in how they are stylized and how they are presented. Because how the whole formula works right now, there really isn't too much that you can do to be able to break out of the either heavily survivor-sided gameplay or heavily unfun gameplay. So, you know, this video ended up being kind of redundant with that last statement, but whatever, that's fine. The people don't usually watch till the end of these videos anyway. My average view rate is like 7 minutes into the video. Anyway, if you liked the video, like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. Subscribe and join my Discord server, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye, guys.